All right. So welcome back, everybody. My name is Dennis Harrigan. I am one of the co-founders of Connecticut Wealth Management. We have with us again Kevin Leahy, who is President, CEO, co-founder of Connecticut Wealth Management. And we have back Mr. Joe Brennan, who is the President and CEO of the Connecticut Business Industry Alliance Association. We are psyched to have Joe come back. Funny, Joe, I was looking at it. We originally spoke March 27th, 7 weeks ago today, right? Amazing. 7 weeks ago today, we had our first conversation with Joe. And Joe has been wild.
You've been doing anything? Joe, you've been doing anything since then?
A lot of R&R.
Yeah. Well, we know Joe has been crazy busy with the Reopen Connecticut project. And so we're going to actually have two conversations with Joe today. The first one's going to be about Reopen, and the second one is going to be about the state of Connecticut. So Reopen Connecticut, Joe, you were selected or punished with being on that committee, and you have been working with the governor and many other folks. And I know you guys came out with some information yesterday and today. And so can you give us a little bit of insight as to how that group has been working, the frequency of meetings, how has that been operating?
Yeah, Dennis, a lot going on there. First of all, just so people understand, there is a committee, a Reopen advisory panel, I guess it's called, of the governor. I'm not on that one. That's the one that Indra Nui and Albert co-chair. It's a small group, I think about 7 people, heavy on medical professionals, public health people. And then there's a bunch of subcommittees under that. And I'm on the Business Advisory Council to that, about 15 members. Cross-section of the business community, organized labor is involved, as well as David Lehman from the ECD. So we are an advisory group. We're not making final decisions, but we are vetting a lot of the recommendations that come along as we try to reopen the state. In addition to our group, there's another group on education, one on community, another on testing. So we're all kind of doing our thing, just trying to help the leaders as to the best guidelines and regulations that are needed in order to reopen our state. A lot of interaction with other states. As you know, the state of Connecticut has joined in coalition with 6 or 7 other northern and northeastern states. So there's a lot of sharing of information. We are ahead of some other states in reopening. We also started out a little bit better, I think, in some other states, because Governor Lamont was fairly liberal in his interpretation of what was going to be an essential business back at the beginning. So, for example, all manufacturers were able to stay open in Connecticut, unlike other states. Construction was allowed to continue here, unlike other states. So what we're looking at now are all those ones that were shut down back in March and reopening in the first phase. A lot of detail behind this, a lot of science driving it. But so far, I mean, it's easy to be critical of this process because you're kind of doing it on the fly and making it up as you go along. But for the most part, I think they put together a good process, and we're all, doing the best we can to have a safe and smooth reopening of our economy.
So Joe, let me just take a moment, if I could, too, and I don't want to overstate it too much, I suppose, but it's well documented, as it should be, the incredible work that the medical workers are doing, and first responders, and so many others. But I want to compliment you, on the work that you've done and your team, as small business owners, right? That Dennis and I are a team of 25. We don't have layers and layers of professional management types to figure these things out, right? So folks like you and your team is just so important, the work that you're doing for small businesses. So all kidding aside, I know we joke about rest and relaxation over the last couple of months. Thanks for everything that you guys have been doing, and certainly thanks for taking the time when we know you're so busy to chat with a couple of knuckleheads like us.
Yeah, well,
so
if I can just if I can just respond to that really quickly. It's really heartwarming, the response that we've gotten from our members, and also heartwarming to see how our team has stepped up, our communications folks, our public policy people, our Constep affiliate. It's really been great. I wish we were under different circumstances, but to see how our team has responded. And then the feedback we're getting, not just from our members, because we're sharing our stuff with everybody, whether I'm a CBIA member or not. And the feedback we're getting even from non-members has really been great. So we know we're filling a service there. It's minuscule compared to the folks you mentioned, the medical professionals, the public health professionals, first responders. Those are the true heroes of this, but we've got our little niche that we're trying to do a good job too.
Well, I'm making my list of people, right, that I took for granted before this, and organizations, and again, CBIA might not be quite at the top of the list like medical folks, but it's definitely on my list of people that I am appreciative to have helping out. So with all that, I know one of the hot topics, and maybe it's quieted down a little bit, but PPP. The first stage of the PPP program, ran through money very, very quickly. Second stage came along. What are you hearing from Connecticut businesses? How is that process going? Is it helpful? What are you hearing?
The first round very quickly was choppy. We knew it would be. Everything was rushed so much. The lenders didn't get a whole lot of guidance, either from SBA or Treasury initially, but that guidance kept coming along little by little. As you know, in the media, there were some folks that probably got some money from that maybe didn't really need it, and small businesses got frozen out a little bit. I had said early on, one of the biggest issues is the SBA designation of small businesses, 500 or fewer employees. In a state like Connecticut, when we think of small businesses, we think maybe 50 and under or 100 or other. So if you have companies with 400 to 500 employees, they were getting a lion's share of the money, and a lot of small businesses had to wait. But when round two came, for the most part, everything I've heard was positive. I heard a lot of companies have gotten assistance. It's been incredibly valuable to them. According to the governor this morning and some other people I've talked to, there's still about $100 billion left unallocated in round two. So we're encouraging a lot of maybe really small businesses that weren't quite aware of the program to contact the SBA or contact their lender and, get in line. And there's going to be another round of assistance at some point, probably not for another month or two, coming from Congress. And whether there's more money for a program like PPP or something different, we don't know. There's issues with it. A lot of companies say, geez, it's got to be extended. It's only for an 8-week period. It's got to be longer than that. So we're trying to work on some changes to it. But for the most part, to answer your question, Kevin, it's been really positive, more so in round one or round two than round one, but just overall a very successful program.
That's awesome to hear. I'm psyched to hear that there is, $100 billion that's almost a third of the second round, which is, so there's plenty of money left for people to apply for. That's encouraging. I was fearful, as many people were, that they would run out of money and people would be left with their hands out asking for more, but that's good to hear. Joe, so it's the 15th of May. May 20th is coming very quickly, and that's the reopen date for phase one. So maybe start with that. So I think there are 3 phases that the state is unveiling. What are the 3 different phases?
Just different industries based on, number of contacts they may have with the public, the length of those contacts, the proximity of distance between employees. All kinds of factors went into this. A lot of this was data driven by DECD and the consultants. So for the first phase is retail in malls. A lot of retail has been open. Big box stores that sell food, any place that sold food was open. So, but extending it to other retail and malls will be on the 20th. Restaurants, obviously there's been a lot in the media about restaurants. They're being allowed for outdoor service only as of May 20th, no bar service. The Restaurant Association has been very active and vocal in trying to move up indoor dining instead of waiting till phase 2, which could be another month or so after May 20th, to try to do it by June 3rd. One thing I will say, just as an aside here, that David Lehman at DECD and the governor and everybody else we've worked with have been incredibly flexible in listening and saying, hey, you make a good case for something, we'll make a change. One example, I mentioned retail. when the retail guidelines first came out, it was no fitting rooms. You just couldn't have fitting rooms. And a lot of the clothing stores said, it doesn't make sense for us to open if people can't try on garments. We think it's actually safer to do it here and let us clean afterwards and take garments home, try them on, and then bring them back if they don't fit. You don't know how contaminated they may be. And the state listened to that. And just today they announced new guidelines, some restrictions. If somebody doesn't purchase a garment, but they've tried it on, it's either got to go into quarantine, the garment does, for 48 hours, or be steam cleaned. But they listened and adapted. So the restaurants are working on trying to accelerate the date of indoor dining. Also, offices, a very broad category. You know, if you're an essential business, and you could go to your office over these last 8 weeks, but if you're in a business that was not declared essential and had to be shut down, but you work in an office, then you can go back to work on May 20th, again, under, you know, a lot of different guidelines, which we can talk about if you like. And then barbershops and hair salons, which has been very controversial. Being on the committee, I've received, can't tell you how many emails from both owners and employees of hair salons saying, we don't feel it's safe. We should not be in round 1. We should be in round 2 or later because of the proximity we have to our clientele. But right now, hairdressers and barbershops can open, and then outdoor museums and zoos is the final category. So, you know, hopefully that will go smoothly. You know, I keep saying to people, you know, at the end of the day, it's not going to be the institutions. It's not going to be, you know, the hospitals or government or business. It's really going to be every individual to decide whether this works or not. And if every single person, you'll never get everybody, but just theoretically, if you had every single person in Connecticut wear a mask when it's appropriate, wash your hands regularly, keep your hands away from your face, social distance, keep that 6 foot or longer barrier. You know, we can really do this safely. And we're just hopeful that people will follow those guidelines. Enforcement is going to be a huge issue. You always have some belligerent people who don't want to follow the rules. And I'm already hearing from people that refuse to wear a mask. And if they want to enter an establishment that is requiring a mask, you know, how do you enforce that without having altercation? So, you know, it's like a rabbit hole when you start doing this stuff. As Jim Lurie, the CEO of Stanley Black & Decker, said the other day, he said, yes, it's a lot easier to shut down than it is to reopen. And it's really true. It's just all kinds of issues that we're running into. So again, I could talk all day because there's so many permutations to all this, but I'll stop there. And
well, let me follow up on a couple. I think what I clearly heard you say, so Dennis is, you know, borrowing my ties all the time. Should I keep those in quarantine for, do you think 48 hours is enough?
Well, you know, I'll leave it up to you to how long maybe you want to put Dennis in quarantine a little bit.
Yeah. All kidding aside, you know, we're a 25-person, you know, a team in an office environment, and we've been very fortunate, Joe. I imagine maybe you've heard this from some others. This has gone, and I don't want to jinx ourselves, but pretty seamlessly, right? This work from home thing, and you know, we're just so pleased with our team and the technology and so forth. And there's some people that have some underlying health issues. There's some people that just don't feel comfortable, maybe, or won't on May 20th. I wonder what you're hearing, if anything yet. Will some companies delay openings? Will they be extra conservative? Do you have a sense what's going to happen, or is it too early to say?
Well, you know, I've got a lot of things I can share. Let me first say a couple points that the state is really stressing, and you touched on both of these, Kevin. Number one, if you are working remotely and can continue, please continue to work remotely. And that's both for essential businesses and new businesses that are coming on May 20th. You know, I'm one of them. I've been, you know, working out of my house for 2 months now, and much more efficient than I ever thought I could be. Technology, thank God for technology. If we did this 30, 40 years ago, it would be a different story. But right now, I can do everything I need to do from here. Most of our team is working remotely, and that's the case with many, many companies. So the state is stressing very strongly, if you can work remotely, continue to do so. It just cuts down on the chances of contracting the virus. And number two, if you're 65 or older or have any comorbidity, I struggle every time. Comorbidities.
We got you.
to not go to work. Now the state, says we can't say you can't come to work. We can't discriminate. We can't have age discrimination. It's going to come down to the employer discussing this with the employee. But if you're 65 or older and have underlying health conditions, respiratory issues, et cetera, you shouldn't be going to work. And hopefully that will be the case. Now, as far as some of the problems companies are facing, not in any particular order, but with daycare being compromised to a large extent for a lot of people, and schools being closed, a lot of people can't go to work right now because of childcare issues. So that's going to be a barrier for some employers. Also, the things I mentioned, either age or underlying health conditions, could keep people from going to work. Fear, as you mentioned, there's a lot of fear out there. I just don't think it's safe. I'd rather stay home, which is totally understandable. And then also, you guys are probably hearing it like I'm hearing it, the $600 weekly bonus for unemployment compensation under the federal law has caused some issues. And, not suggesting that people that unfortunately have lost their jobs don't deserve whatever they can get. But employers are hearing directly from people that they've had to lay off temporarily that, no, I don't want to come back to work because I'm making more money now. And that obviously isn't, a good policy to have. So there has been some talk nationally about continuing those payments for as long as they were supposed to go, but turning it into a return to work bonus. So you can continue to get that extra $600 payment, but you only get it if you go back to work. Whether that makes sense or whatever, have any political support, I don't know, but it is an issue. And finally, as far as companies, it is going to be across the board. I know some restaurants are saying there's no way I can accommodate outdoor dining just because of the size and shape of my facility, the lack of a parking lot. So some will and some won't. Others are saying, if I have to only do outdoor, I've got to get inventory, I've got to bring people back, I'm going to have costs go up. And if I don't have enough volume, I'm going to be losing money while I'm opening. So that's just a decision every restaurant owner is going to have to make. As far as the beauty parlors, as I mentioned, hair salons, et cetera, a lot of the owners are saying, I just think it's way too early to open. I shouldn't open. But their concern is some will, and then do they lose their clientele because people are desperate for a haircut or whatever style, whatever you need at a beauty parlor. So I may lose my clientele if I don't open. And they have further restrictions or limit regulations as far as not only masks, but also face shields. So they have extra expense in getting the PPE that they would need. And then retail across the board, I think allowing fitting rooms will help get more retail clothing type stores open. But some will make the decision, I'm just not ready. Either employees don't want to come back to work or my customers aren't going to come in. The state does have, as you probably know, a self-certification process that's pretty easy to do on the DECD website. And if you certify that you're meeting all the guidelines, you have a badge that you can put on your window to let customers know that you've done everything the state has asked to have a clean workplace. So again, I'm probably going on too long to your questions, but so much data behind all this stuff. But I'll stop there.
It is interesting to me. I know you represent a ton of manufacturing businesses here in Connecticut, and it seems to me like some of the manufacturing businesses, the business owners want to get back to work, which is different than some of the retail and restaurants, which seems like their return to reopen is being driven by consumers. Like it seems. Do I have that right? That's what it feels like.
Yeah, well, as I said before, all manufacturers were declared essential in Connecticut, so they had the opportunity to open the last 8 weeks. Most of the people I talked to have been open. Now, it all depends on the product you make, right? So for those that maybe their products were not essential or in demand right now, those were the ones that did a great job in retooling their operations. So if you had some industrial sewing capabilities, you started making hospital gowns or masks. Others retooled to make a particular part for a ventilator. So we had a lot of companies retool, but they can't do that forever. At some point, they've got to get back to their base industries and their core products. So I talk to manufacturers, formally 3 times a week, and then informally the other days of the week. So For the most part, the folks I'm talking to have been open. They had real struggles initially around mask wear once that became a mandate through an executive order, but they've worked through those things. They're running into problems with the $600 unemployment bonus that I mentioned, as they're bringing some people that they may have laid off back to work. So yeah, they've been declared essential. So one of the challenges we're dealing with here is what rules apply to only the new companies that are opening, and how much apply to both new companies and essential businesses. David Lehman has said there's one of the guidelines says you can't operate any more than 50% capacity in phase one, right? But for a manufacturer or an essential business that's been open, that doesn't apply. You can operate at the same capacity you have been operating at. The self-certification that I mentioned, that is mandatory for businesses that have been shut down and are reopening, but voluntary for any business. So I know some manufacturers, especially the smaller ones, they have gone through that process because they want to put on their window that they've met all the guidelines. So when their employees are coming in, or vendors or suppliers are coming in, they see that the company has met the guidelines. So it's a really across the board. As you mentioned, Dennis, our membership is so broad and so large, covering every industry and every size company. It's hard to generalize, but that's just kind of the basic sense I'm getting from talking to our folks.
We're pressing up on 18 minutes. You guys want to wrap this for today or for this section? Is that cool? All right.
We're driving, whatever you say.
All right. So let's do that. Let's wrap it, and then we'll reconvene. Joe, as we were talking about, I know you've been crazy busy with working on that subcommittee, and thank you for all that you've done on that, and everything that you do as you are heading into the bottom of the ninth inning. We know that you've been taking a whole lot of swings at the plate, so we appreciate how hard you've been working here in 2020. So,
yeah, thanks, guys.
Word from our sponsor, Dennis, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association.
All right. Thanks, Joe. We'll see you.
CBIA.com. Go on and sign up. If you're not a member, join CBIA.com.
Awesome membership. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, guys.